Hello, Isaac.
Rabbi, good afternoon. It's great to see you.
Good afternoon. I'm just noticing the headphones are back on.
Headphones. Well, do you have a headphone? I'm not seeing one with you, so
No, no,
probably
no,
yeah,
no,
I have one.
no headphones today. They make my ears warm.
You're small. Well, maybe on that note, can we get started?
Yeah. Okay. So we're just gonna do one verse today.
Where's
But
one?
a
15.
verse was it 15, but a very
15.
complicated verse.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. It's ambiguous. Anyway, I would love to learn. The Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 9, verse 15. And Jesus said to them, can the wedding guest mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast.
Correct.
It seems so disjointed from the previous verse, right? I mean, it seems so in a
Well, the
way,
last verse said, like, why are all of you always fasting?
yeah,
And then he says, you're right, we're not fasting.
yeah. But anyway, so to me, it felt a bit like this is in more line with his previous answer. It's been ambiguous again through the lens of a parable, which could then mean just multiple things. And he could have just said, well, maybe just not now, later, right? Maybe they're not fasting now; they'll they'll fast later. But anyway,
Well,
would love
I
to.
love how, when you use a parable, when you talk about an allegory, a lot of times everything will be symbolic of another thing. This is something that Maimonides talks about in the Guide for Perplex. He notes that there's different kinds of allegories in the Bible. He says when you look at the book of Job, for example, um, did Job exist? So it seems to me, according to Maimonides, Job did not exist, but it was written as one big allegory. So, okay, with that being said, there's dozens of chapters, and if you don't take each verse, each word seriously, you're missing out. But Maimonides notes that there's a big difference between Job and the story of Jacob going up the ladder in a dream. The story in Genesis, that every single word, every dot, every line is meant to be symbolic of some deeper message. But Maimonides didn't think that about Job as much. He goes, take what you can get from it, but it's definitely not the same level. What I really like about this allegory, this parable over here, is that they ask, do you have to fast? How come you're not fasting? We Pharisees, we disciples of John are fasting. And he gives a parable that is half parable, but it's half literally talking about fasting and answering the question.
So when you mean parable, right? What do you mean? I don't see a parable here. He's saying, hey, like I don't see a parable here, or maybe when I think of parable, it's a story. It has a narrative. It kind of sets up certain things. What I
Well,
see.
so I'm just saying this is a parable and this is a simple story that's used to illustrate a lesson. The story is imagine a wedding, a groom at a wedding. Imagine the happiness of the wedding. Is it okay if people fast? Is it okay if you don't party with the groom? The answer is no. So to me, this is a parable because Jesus is the just like we would have parable of the blind man and the elephant. And the gospel is like, but here Jesus is the bridegroom. And again, you could if you want to argue that Jesus is not the bridegroom, or if you want to argue that who is the wife, and you can argue lots of things. But to me, this is a good example of a simple story, very like one liner, two liner that's used to illustrate a moral lesson. So that's how I would use it as that. So usually an allegory is a story or poem that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning. So for me, this also would qualify as an allegory. So I am using them a little interchangeably, specifically over here.
Mhm.
But what I find so interesting, as I mentioned before, about this story or this allegory that Jesus is saying is that he's using real elements to answer the question. Usually, when you talk about, let's say, a lion is chasing the soldiers, there's no soldiers in real life. There's no lion. He's meant to teach you a lesson. Over here, he's using the bride, using the wedding, using the day of marriage, but he's actually using the fasting to answer the question about fasting. He's like, yeah, you know how you all fast? You can't fast because the bridegroom is here and we're having the wedding and it doesn't make sense. So I think there's elements of reality getting mixed with elements of
Yeah.
allegory
Okay.
here.
So I see here in my translation they use can the wedding guest mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, right? And so the question was about fasting, but he
Right.
connected that
So but we keep reading to the end of the verse though.
with mourning, right?
Well,
And so
we read to the
why
end of the verse. Read the rest of the verse, though.
the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast.
Right. So the reason that fasting is used there is because some people translate the word mourn as fast, but you look at Mark and Luke, it literally does say the wedding guests cannot fast while the bridegroom is here. And in Luke in 5:34, Jesus said you cannot make wedding guests fast. So most people, I have no problem differentiating between mourning and fasting, but most people note that they probably mean something very similar in this context, that you can't be super sad. You can't do mourning elements. A lot of times fasting is viewed as one of those things that is viewed as a negative. And at the end of the verse itself, it says fasting. So that's why I'm noting that
So when I think
I'm
of
using them a little bit interchangeably.
Yeah, so when I think of bridegroom, right, I think of wedding, right? So when I think of the word bridegroom, I think of a wedding, right? And so I'm so a wedding is
And the wedding guests cannot mourn. So he does want you to think of a bridegroom. 100%. I'm thinking that he's setting up this allegory for the day of the wedding. When are the wedding guests there? The day of the wedding, when
wedding.
the party's there. So
Okay.
I'm imagining a wedding and an excitement. And what's interesting about this, when we talk about allegory, I think is no doubt anyone who reads this would read that the bridegroom is Jesus. It could be, you could argue the bridegroom is uh the Holy Spirit, or you could argue the bridegroom is maybe the end of days, or you could argue the bridegroom is that the kingdom of heaven is here. But I think the easiest read is that it's Jesus, and Jesus could be symbolic or representative of all those other things. A lot of Christians, when they read this, they try to figure out who the wife in the story is. So that I think is a mistake in this context. So for example, if you look at Jerome, Jerome says the church, early church father, Christ is the bridegroom and the church the bride. So a lot of others will say, who is Jesus being wed to? Human nature. So for me, this is like taking the metaphor in an unnecessary direction. That we don't need to go who the bride is. We don't need another side. Because the question is, why are all of you fasting? And the answer is, why are all you not fasting? The answer is because we shouldn't be fasting. So to go on, I want to do a couple things today. Number one, I don't know if you'll feel this is offbeat, but uh, if anything, do people fast at weddings? The answer is,
No,
I think
no.
that no one fasts at a wedding, and it's viewed as almost like disrespectful. Imagine you show up at a wedding and it's like the happiest day, but then you say, I am going to fast. It would be viewed as an affront, as something negative. That being said, there's someone who does fast at a wedding, right? A lot of times in Jewish tradition, in Indian tradition, in Muslim tradition, you'll have fasting.
On a
And
in a wedding? I mean, at the wedding. You mean when you mean wedding at a
yeah, at the
marriage
wedding,
wed?
at the wedding. So, like for example, like you look like you rose your eyes at Indian tradition. So we'll talk
Yeah,
about
like I haven't
that.
heard about that. Like I haven't
Okay,
heard about people fasting at a wedding. I mean,
I don't mean to be a colonialist telling you about Indian culture. But when if you think of the Kansar Bhakshan, that's the bride and groom are required for according to certain Indian traditions to fast, and the bride and groom are do that to honor Agni Devata, the fire that represents the bond between the couple in marriage. And secondarily, a lot of times whenever you use things, there's like a medical reason. So according to certain Indian traditions, that's not only to honor Agni Devata, it's also to prevent stomach issues. But if you Google pictures at Indian weddings, a lot of times you'll see them, they wrap their arm. You ever see this? Where you wrap your arm around the woman and you feed her a sweet. The kansar is an Indian sweet that's made of, from various sugars or butters or whatever. And a lot of times it's brought out by the mother and the bride, so that shows like the mother's involved, and then the bride, the other sides will hand the food over to them, and that will generally be after they fast, the first meal of the day. If you Google, it's really cute. You see lots of pictures of this food getting served, and it's supposed to be the first food of the day. So either to honor that or to have less something. But the portion of the ceremony, this is specifically to symbolize that the couple has to now share everything equally with each other. So we do have like this idea of fasting in culture. In Jewish culture, it's really interesting because A lot of people, I'd say most people fast the day of their wedding. I actually know people who got horribly sick from fasting because a lot of times a Jewish wedding is like in the late evening. So if you fast, you really just and you're about to dance a lot. It's too much pressure. But the reason you fast is because in Jewish tradition, there's a Talmudic text that says that you on the day of your wedding, you're forgiven for all your sins. So one of the other days that you're forgiven for your sins is the Day of Atonement. And we know that the Day of Atonement is the day of fast. So a lot of people fast on that day. And so, similar for Muslims. Muslims also will have that you should fast. If you can handle it, maybe it'll be good for your body, whatever. So we see that fasting, on the one hand, is viewed as for the bridegroom himself or for the wife is viewed as something that's positive. But everyone else there, it'll be viewed as something that's super negative and offensive. It's not something you're not asking for her forgiveness. You're not trying to make a connection with the family. You're just trying to have a good time. If anything, in Jewish tradition, the main goal of the wedding guests is to make the bride and groom happy. So over here, we see that Jesus is telling them that they're not allowed to mourn. And it doesn't make sense they do that. And they're not allowed to fast. So if Jesus is the groom, if Jesus is holding the party, does that mean at every single moment that you're not allowed to stop? That you're not allowed to just
Fast.
just
Which
allow the fast? Like if a Christian read this, let's say you're living in the year 25 and Jesus now said this, was he advising the Pharisees or the disciples of the Pharisees and the disciples of John to really recognize while he's on earth and live a different life? What was he trying to instruct them with this parable? What was he trying to communicate?
Yeah, I've thought about that a bit, and I again, this was earlier difficulty because I wish he was more direct, and I said morning,
That
and
would be
it
the
sounds
worst
like
thing, Isaac, if he's
the
more direct.
worst thing, right? And so I go, okay, so what was he trying to tell them? What was he trying to tell them with you don't fast as long as the bridegroom is with them, and then you say the days will come, the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. So what he's saying is, it's just fasting, not right now. And so, but what were you trying to tell them through the midst, like what were you trying to tell them through the midst of that? And I also cannot imagine, right? Now they, in a sense, were itinerant preachers, or the way you said this, as sectarian rabbis who probably commuted from place to place. Um, and so I would imagine they probably had time periods when they didn't, I don't know if they had three consistent meals every day. Like, were the times when their meals were skipped, they had some snack, they ate this and did that, right? And um, so their lifestyle could also, to me, can mean a form of fasting, a form of self-denial, a form of mourning. Um, but I want to throw this back to you. I don't know what he's trying to convey through all of this. It seems, again, to me, it seems it seems
Well,
very ambiguous.
well, I think one of the things that we have to, before we can even figure out what this means, and I'm not sure we're going to, but one thing we have to know, let's just summarize it. He's saying that right now is not a time of fasting and
Fasting.
mourning, but the days will come when me, Jesus, or the kingdom of heaven, whatever, is taken away, and then you'll be sad. So it's also like this ominous notion. He's not saying don't fast. He's saying right now don't fast. And I think one thing that we have to do is just flip. And if you could take out your handy dandy New Testament and flip to Mark 25.
So he's not saying the kingdom of heaven will be taken away. He said, when the bridegroom is taken away, you'll fast. That doesn't mean the kingdom of heaven is taken away,
Well, I
right?
view that. I personally view that as Jesus being taken away. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
okay.
right. Yeah, I'm just giving you different options. Okay.
And
So let's look at chapter 25 of
you mean,
Mark,
mhm.
and you can read it. Just read through 1 through 13.
Just give me a second, Mark. Mark does not have 25 chapters, does it?
Mark
You
doesn't.
mean, no?
Am I messing up in the place? Oh, I meant. Sorry, I meant Matthew 25. Sorry.
Oh, Matthew 25. Okay, yeah. Just give me a second.
Sorry
Matthew.
about that. Yeah. Mark does not. Yeah.
So let me pull this up over here. That didn't. Matthew 25. Okay, Matthew 25, which Why is it all not working today?
Just right, just 1 to 13, the parable of the 10 bridesmaids.
Yeah, I can read. Yeah, I can. You want me to read the
Yeah, just
entire?
read 1 to 13. Yeah.
Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, Here, here is a bridegroom, come out to meet him. Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. But the wise answered, saying, Since there will not be enough for us and for you, go gather, go rather to the dealers and buy for yourselves. And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward, the other virgins came also, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered, Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour.
Okay. So the reason I thought this was important to see this because A, it's just another parable about a bridesmaids and or a wedding. And I think it has a almost complicated relationship to what we just read. Because on the one hand, I think everyone who reads this makes it sound like, listen, Jesus is going to die. He's going to rise again. And those who wait for Jesus to rise again and are getting ready, doing a great job. Everyone else doing a bad job. And I think that's a pretty simple parable. And I think that's how most people read it. But when you read our text right here, it almost feels like in chapter 9 that is Jesus, you can't tell if Jesus is really talking about right now or a future time. He makes it sound like he's talking about right now that you can't fast, but it almost feels like this Christianity is going in like cycles. First, Jesus is there, you can't fast. And then Jesus is not there and you can't fast. And then Jesus will be there again and you can't fast. And it almost feels like you don't know how to carry out your normal life. And if anything, this is the exact situation that the disciples of John and the disciples of the Pharisees were feeling, that Jesus doesn't seem to be giving a stable, concrete, systemic message. Because why would it be different if he's alive or not? Let's imagine you believe that Jesus is coming to change the metaphysical world. The kingdom of heaven is here. When he dies, is the kingdom of heaven not here anymore? And only when he rises again will it be here again? I think that this relationship of how Jesus is telling us about what the world is right now is very, very unclear. It sounds
Unclear.
like he feels when he's around, it's special. When he's not around, it's not special anymore.
Yeah, so to kind of add to that, right? So when I read Matthew 17:21, right? Matthew 17:21, 17:21 was it? Wait, 17. Uh, oh,
You want me to read it?
yeah, I'm trying to look this up. It's yeah. So in this case, right, he makes a case where you have to fast because um, uh,
You want me to read 17:21?
yeah,
Jesus answered, You faithful and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you? How much longer must I put up with you? Bring him here to me.
Yeah,
Uh,
and then I'm sorry, the worst was that they would ask him, Lord, why couldn't we do this? And he told them, you cannot do this without unless you fast and pray. So in that sense, maybe I'm looking at the wrong verse. There's a verse where people bring a demon possessed man to disciples. They couldn't drive out the demon. Um, and then so when they come to Jesus, Jesus could do this, and they ask like, why couldn't we do this? So in that verse, maybe on a different version, this is Matthew 7:21, right? However, this kind does not go out but by prayer and fasting. Um, And maybe verse 20 onwards. And Jesus said to them,
Oh, I'm sorry. I read 17:17. That's my
so,
fault.
yeah, 17, 20, 21, right? And Jesus
Yeah.
said to them, because of your unbelief, for verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say to this mountain, remove here and go there, and it shall move, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. However, this kind does not go out but by prayer and fasting. So in this verse, right, he mentioned again, reference that he fasts and prays, and they are not fasting and praying. And I think that seems obvious. But so what I'm trying to get towards is that the earlier verse we saw in Matthew 9, he's telling them don't fast, but he has a discipline of fasting and praying. But it's also very ambiguous. Like, what do you mean don't do this now, but you can do this later?
Yeah, actually, my Matthew is not exactly identical to what you're saying either. So let's just look at King James. King James is, however, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. So it seems to be a pro-fasting line here. So we're noting the contradictory nature of Jesus' attitude towards fast. So first we started off by saying that fasting makes it looks like you're if you look like you're fasting, people you will not get the reward because people you're just trying to get people to look at you and see the benefits of that. Then we see that fasting is something that the Pharisees are doing. And then we see him saying to get rid of demons, there's fasting. At the end, we see that people aren't gonna be happy. So yeah, so it's complicated. Jesus' attitude towards fasting, it seems to go back and forth, and it seems to be a bit contradictory, right? Okay, so it's not something that I don't know what to tell you.
So it's he's not saying don't fast. He's saying sorry. What he's saying is he's just saying you don't have to fast now, but you'll have to fast later. And that signpost of when that later comes, it's when he's taken away. Which I can write from a Christian perspective, right? It's hard for me to fully wrap a head around this because Christians don't believe Jesus is taken away, like he's still alive. Like at least Christian belief is it's not like he's dead. It's not like a human person died, but we believe he died, he rose again, he's alive, that he's still alive today, and he's in a different way, right? And um, so I don't see a world where he's completely gone or he's completely taken away. So I don't know what it means by when the bridegroom is taken away. That seems a sense
Well,
of
it
final.
just seems to me that putting fasting aside, is that the times when Jesus is literally on earth, that you're supposed to have a different relationship to commandments. And a person who is mourning or sad when Jesus is around is kind of missing the purpose of the world. That's what it sounds like to me.
Um, yes, but so that's where it sits upon Christian theology, right? Like Christians, even so, when Matthew wrote this, he would not say Jesus is dead. He would believe that Jesus is alive, because he's seen the resurrected body. And so, how would this message would have landed? As in, they never fully believed. Like even though he died, he rose again, he's alive. So he's never gone away. He's always with them.
Yeah, again, I don't know the level that he thought that he's always with them, though. It's a good question. Like, a lot of people believe Eliyahu Navi, Elijah, the prophet, didn't die,
Didn't I?
but doesn't mean they think they're gonna see him everywhere, right?
Yeah, okay. So this is where I think Christian theology takes a different turn, where he wrote again. That's where I think that's where Christian takes a different turn from Judaism and Jewish faith, where he speaks about that he died and he rose again, and they had seen him, and they've touched his body and touched his hand, and they've seen his nail scarred hands. Say, Rabbi, like, look, and I know it's ambiguous, right? But if there's one takeaway, if you had to say, you know what? Yes, it's ambiguous, but if there's one takeaway in this, what would you say? What would you say? We
Again,
say
I
you have
think it sounds like to me that Jesus is criticizing people for not taking advantage for when he's on earth.
that's a good perspective. And so taking advantage, and so would you say that by not fasting, that you trusting in him, or one having faith in him, or one knowing that he's there? Like, is that what he's saying?
Yeah,
Not
I think that you're supposed to be happy specifically, and the person who's mourning, it's almost like you're living the wrong kind of lifestyle.
and
Before we
that
go, yeah. So before we go, can I read you one more story? Just 'cause I
yeah.
thought like it's a little. I feel like we should have said it earlier, but it feels like on brand a little bit. So just read. I'll try to read to you quickly because we're running out of time. So in the Babylonian Talmud 156b, there's a story of R Akiva, who would be a first and second century rabbi, that his daughter once went to the market to buy things for the home, And as she passed a group of fortune tellers, one of them said to her, "See this beautiful girl? What a dreadful calamity is waiting for her. She's going to die on the day of her wedding. Mark my word." So Rabbi Akiva's daughter overheard the words of this fortune teller, but paid no attention to her because she didn't care about fortune telling. She had often heard it from her great father that he who observes the commandments and the holy Torah need fear no evil. As the happy day of her wedding approached, she had forgotten all about the fortune teller. On that day before her wedding, there was much to do, and at the night she retired to bed, tired but happy. Before going to bed, she removed her golden hairpin, which was just a needle, and stuck it in the wall to not lose it. And as she done that, as she always did before, the following morning she pulled her pin out of the wall, and in doing so, she dragged a small but very poisonous snake that she stabbed in the head by accident by storing her pin. Horrified, she realized that she had killed the snake that was lurking in the walls, crevices, when she struck it the pin in the wall of the night. And she realized like it felt like a miracle took place for her. Then she remembered the words of the stargazer and thought, "Oh my God!" So she heard a knock on the door, and it was her father. He said, "What's the matter?" Because she shrieked about the snake. And then he saw the dead snake still clinging to the pin, and she told her father a story. And he said, Rabbi Kiva said, "This is indeed a miracle. Tell me, daughter, what do you do yesterday?" And there must have been some special commandment, some special mitzvah that you performed yesterday to have been saved from this. Well, the only thing that I can remember yesterday was last night when everyone was busy preparing for my wedding feast today. A poor man came by, but nobody seemed to care about the poor guy. So everybody was too busy to care. So I saw the man was hungry, and I took out my portion of food that I was going to be eating my wedding today, and I gave it to him. And therefore, this miracle happened for her. And Rabbi Kiva said, that's why happy. And he goes, charity is the thing that delivers you from the dead. So I felt this story is really apropos for our verse today because A, it talks about weddings and it talks about having like life and death on the table. And I think that the message over here is that at a wedding day, the message from Jesus is that you have to appreciate the groom. You have to realize that you should live your life differently because when you're in his presence, the whole message is that if you're not recognizing the presence of the bridegroom and you're fasting or you're mourning or you're doing anything negative, you're almost missing the point of the day. And this is how Jesus is trying to teach about the kingdom of heaven. When he's around, you're missing that point. So for Rabbi Kiva and for his daughter, the wedding itself is a great thing, but every single thing in life is really just an opportunity for them to do a commandment. And when it says that she was saved because she did a commandment, like he goes like the reason that this stargazer or this fortune teller was able to tell the truth, and you, according to destiny, were supposed to have a certain death on that day. That day of life was supposed to become a day of death. But by you living a different kind of lifestyle and you giving charity to that poor person and taking care of the meek on a day when no one else cared about it, you reorganize your lifestyle in a way that you're able to have life when you're supposed to have death. So again, like I think this maybe parallels a Christian message, or you can argue it doesn't, depending on how you want to view this parable. But I think like you have like a clear message from this wedding day that at least seems to be similar to the message of Jesus that you have to live your life differently. Just because you have the wedding day, you have to take note of what is the importance of it. And for Jesus, the importance of it was again either kingdom of heaven or himself was around to lead. And for Rabbi Kiva, the importance of the wedding day is that you still have to live a holy lifestyle.
I think that's a great parable. Thank you for that. Thank you for that parable. And so I think that's something to think on, reflect on, and I think they both are hinting towards the same thing, but probably saying you have to look at this. He was focused upon him, but Kiva was focused. Rabbi Kiva was saying, we do the commandments, do the right thing, and live by God's way.
Exactly. Hey, Isaac, I guess we'll call it a day.
Okay, Rabbi. On that note, thank you. We're going to call it. It's raining. It's heavy rains out here. Well, on that note, it's great. I'm great studying. Thank you for your time, Rabbi. Have a great day.
Okay, you too.